Welcome to the What's in Store podcast from IDDBA.
Well, hello, friends, and we're back with this edition of our What's in Store podcast. I'm Whitney Atkins, Vice President of Marketing and Membership for the International Dairy-Deli-Bakery Association, and I am super excited to have a guest with me today. That's Tim Powell. With more than 20 years of experience in business strategy, market research, and consulting, Tim Powell has spearheaded research and consulting engagements for global and national companies in the food and beverage industries. At Foodservice IP, he delivers strategic research and consulting, guiding clients in defining and achieving sustainable market positions. His expertise spans market intelligence, thought leadership, keynote speaking, brand positioning, and leadership, driving measurable success across diverse organizations. I mentioned that I was excited about this, and I will tell you that Tim and I have been connected for some time on LinkedIn. It's been great to connect with him, learn from him, especially as we as an association here at IDBA continue to really focus on our food service segments and what that means for both our retail member companies and especially how they go to market and strategies in their deli and bakery department. So welcome, Tim.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, Whitney. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a lot to talk about today. So we're just going to start right away and really start this conversation, Tim. So, as we talk about navigating food service challenges and opportunities in 2025, I really want to talk to you about how we look at some really key components of that, from balancing cost, consumer trends, which IDBA does a great job of really presenting that education to our industry through our education resources, whether it's our What's in Store trends, our What's in Store live, on the show floor, monthly category reviews, and really expert knowledge in data and trends. So we just launched our own set of trends as we do every year. So I look forward to talking about those as well as we go forward. And of course, innovation. Innovation is something that everybody talks daily about in our industry, right? And how we continue to make our operations more efficient, more engaging, and absolutely how we go forward with continuing to grow our industry. So with that, again, welcome, Tim. And I'd love to just start talking about, as I mentioned trends. Let's look at the economic and consumer trends. I'd love to hear your thoughts on where we are. Obviously, we're in a political landscape this year, and we're really looking at how we go forward with inflation. Your expertise and your advice on really how to tackle that going forward.
Sure. I can start off by saying that this is very similar to 2008 and maybe 2019, where we, right before COVID, because there really has not been an economy like this where we're seeing job growth, we're seeing some inflation dropping a little bit, yet prices are still very high, both at the grocery store and at food service. And the reason I bring up grocery stores, even though this is food service, is that really takes a bite out of discretionary income. Usually when consumers cut back, the first thing they'll usually say is, we're not going to eat out as much. So we're seeing a big shift in the value proposition, hospitality, menu desirability. That's where something's very craveable, something is on trend. That's why fast casual has been so successful that way. I think with prices staying where they are, we still expect CPI to probably moderate a little bit. We have food at home prices are going to be lower. We think around 1.6%, while food away from home would be 3.1%, and that's core CPI. So that strips out food and energy. So we just see that even though the pandemic ended 4 years ago, we're starting to see the residual effects of some of the backlash. The growth we're going to see in some of food service and some of the trends that we're seeing with the growth of it is, Gen Z were really a young group just 5 years ago, and they're starting to become the most frequent users of food service. They're very they're very quick to point out in the supply chain what the brand represents, where they're getting their food from, much like millennials were a decade ago, knowing how sustainability works, how corporate social responsibility works. It's really important to them that who they buy from has a purpose. That's why we've seen Panera Bread do well. That's why we've seen Chipotle do well, because they have a good story. But they also deliver on the basics. And the thing that is going to be recession proof, the thing that is always going to be important in consumer trends is just delivering on those fundamentals, the service, so that you're not going through the drive-through and you go through the drive-through and you see this on TikTok. Yeah, I'm up with a young crowd. I know TikTok. And you see it and they say, here I went through the drive-through and then they forgot my hot sauce. You have to be very good at what you're doing and very consistent, or you're most likely going to get roasted online. Also, the food just has to be solid flavor profile, the taste, the quality, every customer visit, and then the unit appearance has to be very clean. Nice workers, manager presence is always a positive thing. So we don't really see those core basics ever changing. But we do see that the prices have not gone down as quickly as we'd expect them to, based on what we're seeing on TV. When we look at it, just get on any economic channel and you'll see that it looks like employment growth is up, unemployment is down. We added, I think, something like 240,000 jobs in December. I'd have to check that. It's something like that. Yet a lot of us are still not feeling like wage growth is kept up with that. But we're also dealing with the generation of Gen Z and millennials that grew up eating out. So they're going to be our area of growth, yet eating out is very expensive for them. So that's sort of the long-winded answer of how I see consumers impacting 2025 and probably the next 3 to 4 years.
No, all great comments, and I'm always fascinated by the study of how generations shop and the differences throughout those. Gen Z, no different. I think for us, you talk a lot about quick serve restaurants, and here at IDBA, we try to take that knowledge and really transfer it over to retail locations and what that looks like in dairy or in deli and bakery throughout retail stores. You made some great points there. You talk about consistency. That absolutely is one that we see as gotta happen. If somebody's going to come in to our retail delis, they want that food there. They want it available. They want it consistent. They want consistent taste. So absolutely one of the opportunities we continue to focus on as we look at those operations in our retail stores for obviously a deli and restaurant style meals. You talk about Gen Z and you talk about how they trend, they're the generations of eating out more, right? One of the things that we focus on here at IDBA also, in addition to food service, is convenience store. And we really see that as a continuing growing segment. If you look at some research that I often quote is I remember listening to a panel of Gen Zers and they talked about how they go buy their dinner at the local convenience store. Convenience store means so much different to them than what it did for my generation. And you think about how they can just go in and maybe it's Sushi Friday. They can pick up groceries. They can get their gas. And a lot of times that's where they buy groceries these days. So we have to learn how to take advantage of those type of opportunities as well with our members from our convenience store format, and so much to be learned from there. So thank you for sharing that. You were right. I just saw that report, I believe, last night or the night before, and I believe 240,000 is the same number I remember from the December jobs report. So thanks for sharing that. And as we just continue to talk about different ways the consumer is engaging or how they're engaging, talk to me a little bit about some maybe of the traffic troubles or consumer engagement you see as going forward as well.
Well, I think that, and I did like your C-store comment, and I liked the food service at retail. So supermarket and retail are amazingly strong growth areas for IDDBA members. The grab and go possibility there, because it's a one-stop shop. It's a great advantage right now when we're talking about traffic. So and that's why I said, like 2008, when the Dow was down to 6,000 points and we didn't know what was going to happen, you could go to a C-store, you could go to a retailer, you could do two things. You could get your restaurant meals for the evening, and you could also get your groceries as well. So those are very strong points, and we see very strong growth in those areas. We do a C-store study every other year, and we're starting one here in February. And it's amazing that, as you say, when you grew up, it was gas station food. I mean, that's really what it was. It's got gas station food. And I tweeted yesterday about Johnny's Markets and a food service program, and that's just one of many examples of where you get fresh grab and go items, where you can get fresh fruit wraps and healthy snacks. And it's not just a roller grill. It's not just a coffee that's sitting there for 3 days. I mean, Gen Z does not have any problem with going to a food truck, which we used to call roach coaches, or going to a C-store. So there's a lot of growth there. Yeah, and in terms of traffic, I think the biggest change we saw since COVID was the growth of aggregators, of DoorDash, of Uber Eats, not leaving your home. Particularly retailers and C-stores were those, they had to stay open during those times. That gave them a good advantage over the restaurants that had to shutter. Or make, like in Chicago, we had streets shut down so that they could eat outside. You could still be 6 feet away from each other. The eating at, like, takeout has always been pretty big in QSR. It's always been about 80% going through the drive-through, opposite of casual dining, where it's always been about 20%. In the past, we've seen Chili's and Applebee's sort of finagle around with that, but ever since DoorDash and the likes of the other aggregators have come in, about 50% of that has been delivery since 2020. So we're seeing that become a big part of traffic. And a question that I had as we look at numbers from NPD or I guess Circana now, is that those traffic counts do include those occasions where it's delivery. The challenge, though, is how can these concepts survive based on, if they have, say, 30% of their economics is labor, 30% is maybe rent and real estate, and then you got maybe 27% of food cost. I mean, you're looking at about a 3% operating profit. That's a really, really tight number when you consider that they're going to order something online and there's going to be fees associated with that. So the traffic count, we expect, will probably continue to be fairly strong in fast casual because of the dedication to it. And I'll put Starbucks in that. It's something where you have, even though we have Liz Moss coming out, for example, there's a couple other concepts that are coming out as beverage only. It is really popular to the 18 to 22-year-old females to get beverages. And beverages typically have a cost of about 8%. So you're looking at a huge gross profit off of those. The thing is, if you have a Liz Moss, it's not Starbucks. And like you just said about C-stores, if you go to get pizza and you're in the Midwest, you don't say, I'm going to a C-store to get pizza. You say, I'm going to Casey's. You say, I'm going to Texas Born, whereas you and I would say, why are you going to a gas station? And I think for them, it's very important. Branding is very important. The messaging is very important. It's not just the product; it's what that product means to their peer group. Traffic counts, casual dining will continue to struggle. They've continued to struggle. I could say the same thing I said 15 years ago. It's just very difficult to get people into the dining rooms now, and it's also very difficult to be differentiated. Varied menu has been challenged for years, and they have to start to evolve. Either they're going to trade down, move down to more QSR-like, or they're going to try to compete with fast casual. I mean, Applebee's has a deal out right now where they're competing against McDonald's. They show that for $9.99 you can get this great looking burger, and then they show the McDonald's burger, which looks horrible, of course. $9.99 you get this huge big bundle deal of food. And so that's an example of where they're trying to take some of that share from the QSR. The problem is it's the timing and it's the convenience. And what COVID did is it's like when it's cold out and you can have something delivered or you can go pick that up via DoorDash or order on the app. It's so much easier to do that than to sit down. But in terms of traffic counts, we expect those probably declining visits. I mean, we see forecasts maybe down 3.4% to 2.4% because sales cannot continue to pick up either. They can't keep passing prices on to consumers. And that's why you've seen this growth of beverage-only concepts, because they know you can charge $3.99 for a beverage, but the rest of the bundle deal is $5.99. It's not sustainable. You cannot maintain the same traffic growth and pass on those costs if labor prices are going to start increasing, and also the supply coming in from elsewhere. If it's packaging coming from China, takeout packaging coming from China, that's all going to just tack on expenses to delivery as well.
Yeah, no doubt there's challenges ahead, but some of the things that I want to hit on that you talked about is how QSR uses some loyalty programs, right? Like, how would that translate? And I see that easily translatable over to retail deli and loyalty, not only within the deli but across the store, right? How can you reward customers for that? And then, as well, you see that. We just talked about the convenience store format. You mentioned Casey's, which is obviously popular here in the Midwest as I sit in Madison, Wisconsin today, but absolutely important to those that frequent. And, one of the things, we talked a lot about Gen Z, right? But I will tell you, as we talked to some groups recently, and I can't wait to hear more about the study you're doing this year that you're starting in February for convenience stores. But, we also hear older generations like, oh, heck yeah, why wouldn't I stop at X convenience store and get Friday sushi? It's crazy how that trend is really happening. And when we talk about convenience and we talk about expectations and really quality and consistency, I think that convenience stores, and I'll continue to focus on those for a minute, like Quick Trip here has done a fabulous job of creating that loyalty. And really it's about having the product, having it there, having it fresh, much like that quick serve restaurant. You talked about delivery service, and that's one that's really fascinating for me as we go forward. As I look at talking to our members in our industry, how important would that be to be able to offer those same services? Of course, you talk about, I believe it was 3% you talked about in overall profit, and we would struggle with that, right? Retail, we often have a little higher markup in those departments throughout. So interesting on how we can continue to look at that. I don't know that that's going to happen in our retail delis and bakeries in the next year, maybe 3 to 5, but it's certainly something that is a challenge that we need to continue to focus on. How can we implement that? Can we implement that, and really what that looks like at our retail locations? You talk about some different things like unique dining experiences. Obviously, we do have some retailers that have those sit-down dining experiences, and they include everything from the omni-channel all the way down to maybe they have a Friday night special and they have sit down, or maybe it's barbecue, maybe it's fish, whatever the case may be. They're creating those experiences within the store, and obviously that drives traffic into our retail locations as well. You talked a little bit about supply chain volatility, and I will tell you, we have a large member base of manufacturers as well. They really represent the industry across segments. They have the same challenges of supply chain, ingredient costs, all of those things. So I would love to hear a little bit. You talked about packaging, but talk a little bit about impacting the commodity prices. I'm sure our audience would love to hear some of your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, that's one of those that we're we're still waiting on. We have the new administration is saying that they're going to tax Canada, we're going to tax Mexico, we're going to tax China. A lot of our trading partners where we get, it doesn't necessarily mean food, but it's those products that are very important to food, whether it's oils, whether it's dairy, packaging products, plastics, things that are really important that help the C-store, the retailers that offer food, food service, and just the restaurants survive or to keep running smoothly. So I think commodity costs are really I think the thing is to try to really look at, do you have a contingency plan in place? These are the kind of things that we look at. So let's say the U.S.-China trade war continues. We get a lot of soybean prices from there, so that's going to affect those as ingredients. Plant-based protein companies like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods, they count on a lot of those types of imported products. Specialty ingredients affect high-end dining. So I think just monitoring the geopolitical developments that could affect the supply chain for your members, those that have C-stores that are, corn prices, that's really important because the reason someone will go to a C-store typically is for the beverage. And then the whole point of it is to let's get them in the store and then let's increase that check average with the grab and go, something around the perimeter, and try to gain share that way. The thing that I would advise, and we advise operators as well as manufacturers, is to have a contingency in terms of how will you get that supply. If you remember a few years ago, the biggest thing was no more using plastic straws. There was this picture that came out of a plastic straw in the nose of a turtle, and everyone thought, "Oh no, we got to get rid of straws. Everything's gonna be paper." And so they switched over to paper. So a few companies did. They invested a lot of money into paper straws. Well, you know what? Paper straws didn't work. They were not functional. It didn't matter. And the other thing is, you don't have to have a straw. You can drink something without it. Starbucks figured it out with its lid. You can just drink with a lid. And I think those sorts of examples of and you mentioned innovation, how can we be innovative in the supply chain if we have clamshell packaging that's clear? We do know that styrofoam is still the very best clamshell for protecting food, for keeping it at the proper temperature, yet it has the worst reputation of anything. So I think just having a team that can look ahead and think, well, maybe there are alternatives to the way that we get our certain commodities. And until we get a handle on where food inflation is going to be and if this is going to be bluster from this administration in terms of our trading partners, it's really hard right now to know how to sort of forecast what that's going to look like. But strategists can come together in companies and say, okay, well, let's look at this matrix. We love matrices. So we would look at what's the probability of this happening, and then what kind of impact would that have on our company. And that is the square you want to look at. You want to say, okay, well, if this happened, what would we do? And that's really what we try to do here, is to help companies be prepared, because it's we're dealing with a mixed bag of higher prices, of potential geopolitical tariffs and issues with our trading partners. So I know I can't give you a great answer on that, because we're trying to figure it out now. We're trying to put our forecast together, and it's difficult to know if a number of these things are going to come to fruition, or if this is just some of the threats that are being made by the current administration. We really aren't sure, but always having that plan in place, which I'm sure a lot of your members do as they come up with their 2025 strategies, think about commodity costs and supply chain, and figure out, are there substitutes that could be out there? If you did have to make certain changes to recipes to help operators cut some of those costs. Good relationships with broadline distributors, also good relationships with grocery distributors like McLean for C-Store. That's going to be really important along the way here as we sort of navigate this like on a month-by-month basis.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned the planning and how important that is, and having my communications background, you think of different plans you want to put in case a scenario happens, right? And really the key is to understand what that impact would be and how you would respond. I think now more than ever, as we talk innovation and we talk about forward strategy, we have to look beyond today, right? And we all learned that. We kind of talked about the pandemic a little bit earlier and all of that, but we've all learned from that, right? And one of the things that we did learn is, hey, what happens when that supply chain gets interrupted, right? And so no different in this conversation. We have to be ready for that. We have to consider the impacts of that and know how we would react in case any of that were to unfold and happen. So, great insights, and I appreciate you sharing those insights. We've talked a little bit. We talked about the economy, labor pressures, all of those things. So, one of the things we do here at IDBA is we really want to focus on providing that data. Our education team does that, if you're not aware, Tim, through monthly category reviews. We use a lot of the data companies to be able to share those resources out to help our members make those decisions. We have a Friday outlook that we share, and it gives current commodity pricing so that while we do want to be prepared for the future, we want to provide that real time too to create action. So that's one of the things that our education team works on daily. And then, of course, the podcast here is called What's in Store, and we create not only a digital resource overall for the year, but we update that every month and every quarter. Those are obviously some things that we do here at IDBA, and I know at Foodservice IP you guys do continually do that as well.
And what
go ahead. Nope, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was going to add to that is, we are brand agnostic. I mean, we fit. It's great because we're familiar with IDBA and looking at Data Central or Cleveland Research or Technomic, and having that information. We always tell our clients to, use as much information as you can. The thing that makes food service really challenging for retailers in the perimeter and C-stores doing food service is there isn't a barcode. Unfortunately, there isn't. We don't know how big it's going to be. We don't know. I can tell you, how big a ham sandwich is, or a Hot Pocket or enrobed sandwich is. The Technomic or Data Central, they may have their different scope and different segments that they're including in that. It's really, really important to get as many resources together to come up with the best idea for where we are in food service, and to continue to try to fuel a strategy based on what some of those things are. I mean, which categories are you seeing that will have the best growth for you? What categories rely on some of those commodity costs, like sugar, cocoa, packaging materials, any of those things? You'll really want to be very careful to ensure that you've done your homework. And it sounds like what you do on here is giving your members as much information as possible, because let's be honest, it could be sourced Tim Powell. How big is this? Well, I can tell you the whole audit trail of what distributors are doing, what operators are doing, what competitors and suppliers say they're doing. But when it comes down to it, there just is not that IRI, which used to be IRI data, where we could say the last 52 weeks of this certain product. So it's just something that we have to continually look at. Employment growth, consumer confidence, disposable personal income, GDP growth, which we're expecting to be about 2.5% this year. All of those things, and grocery prices. I don't want to forget that, because that takes so much out of the away from home dollar. And the good thing is your members having prepared foods in the perimeter. That gives them an opportunity to pick something up ready to prepare in one shopping visit. Same thing with C-Store. You can get your gas, you can get a food service item, and you can also get some quick grocery items. And that's very strong when we have an outlook, because our outlook is more bullish than Data Central and Technomic when it comes to C-stores and retailers. We just think it's much stronger because of the uncertainty we're going to see this year with QSRs, fast casual. Even though we didn't talk much about non-commercial, but certainly for non-commercial as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we have here at IDBA, we also have a partnership with Euromonitor. Euromonitor is where we pull our we call it Global Scopes database from. You mentioned some of the challenges in both bakery and deli not having UPC barcodes, and that's one of the things that Euromonitor really does well. I think it's about 17 or 18 countries we can pull information from now because we recognize that operations in deli and bakery are very different across throughout domestically here as well as international. We realize a lot of trends come from our international companies, and we focus on those in our VP of Education, Heather Prock, and Industry Relations. Heather Prock does a great job of defining our trends going forward using all that data. We also partner with companies like NIQ, BIXA. We offer some reporting and member value through those. So lots of different ways that we bring data to our members. You mentioned a lot of trends in consumer data from government now, and we include those in our What's in Store reporting as well. And of course, we offer monthly webinars that cover an array of topics like we covered today and really explore those. So with that, as we kind of wind down for today, I'd love to give you back the floor to say if there's anything else that you'd like to mention to our audience today. I think you and I could have about a 3-hour conversation, and I look forward to hopefully having you back as a podcast guest in the future. So with that, I'm turning it back over to you real quick to see if there's anything else you'd like to explain or talk to our audience about.
Yeah, Whitney, I think you're right. I think we could talk about this for hours. Just 30 minutes went very quickly. What I will say is I've been in food service about 25 years, and the one thing that I do know is we have to eat. So the positive thing that I want to leave for people is that we used to, I remember the days when we saw the share of food sales were 60% retail, 40% away from home. We used to always say share of stomach those 25% away from home and then 75% retail. We have seen that shift significantly because we want convenience. We want food that's different. We still look at going out to eat as a special occasion. The one thing I don't want to do for your members is to say that, while we're having a challenging year, we've been here before. I mean, we thought COVID was going to be the death of us, and we only got stronger. And I think the categories and the segments that your members are in represent some of the strongest growth across all segments. I think I wouldn't go as far as to say recession-proof, but I'd say that's where you're going to find your traffic, and that's where you're going to find your users. So I think that's a really positive thing that I'd like to leave with your members.
Yeah, what a great perspective. And I was sitting here thinking the same thing. Like, we've been there, we've done that. How do we take advantage of where consumers, how they go to market now, or how do we take advantage of all these opportunities ahead of us and learn from each other to continue to grow business? And I think we've seen that across some industries after COVID and after the pandemic as we've really all worked together to grow that. So great positive perspective. I appreciate that. I really appreciate you joining today. Again, thank you for your insights. And really, most importantly, I'd like to remind our audience that, Tim and I connected on LinkedIn. At IDBA, we're talking about connections. We like to connect people. We like to build those relationships. So, learn from that. Connect with folks on LinkedIn. Here at IDBA, we have a year-round app. You can connect and network on that as well, and I encourage you to be a part of that app if you're not already joined in, but you can really make connections through that. So follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Instagram, see those visuals and see those products that are out there. So again, Tim, thank you for your time today as we look forward. And we've also got some exciting things happening in our podcast world. Each quarter, our President and CEO David Hoff will be interviewing another president and CEO and really talk about from a high level where they see the industry going, how it impacts consumers, and really some growth opportunities. So we look forward to adding that to our podcast segments going forward. So again, Tim, thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me, Whitney. I appreciate it.
And with that, we look forward to seeing you all on our next podcast, What's in Store, here at the IDBA.